Hey everyone, the Dark Knaik is here. Lex Luthor gatecrashes the Fortress of Solitude and discovers a Kryptonian message that is later used to raise doubts about Superman's heroism. Meanwhile, Superman delves into Luthor's secrets, determined to expose his sinister schemes and corrupt empire to the world. At long last, James Gunn's much anticipated Superman arrived. And I'm relieved to say, it didn't disappoint. With another attempt at DC Comics world building after the super flop continuity of the 10-year conundrum, my optimism rested on James Gunn. Not because of his direction, but in something more reassuring, his deep-rooted love for comics, so he brings an authentic fan's perspective. And that rare blend of geek-level devotion and industry clout is precisely what DC's fractured universe has long been starving for. Superman is light, heartfelt, and thrilling, but above all, it's a deeply human story that reaffirms Superman's true purpose on Earth. James Gunn delivers wholesome entertainment with emotional weight. While the 2-hour runtime felt a bit short, it packed in what mattered the most: the iconic and electric rivalry between Superman and Lex Luthor, a timeless clash that remains the backbone of the Man of Steel's legacy. In this assessment, I'd highlight a few key aspects I found impressive, worth discussing, and in some cases, even a bit problematic. Something that was terribly missing and was forgotten from the comic book canon for a long time was how humans never recognized that Clark Kent is Superman. After all, the only way Superman disguised himself was by wearing glasses. And that assumed human deception was a plain stupid theory for decades. But thanks to the comic book writer Tom King, this is no more a mystery. When Lois Lane visits the Justice Gang at the Hall of Justice, Guy Gardner questions whether she knows about the Hypno-Glasses, the tech that makes Superman's face appear different to everyone else. While this idea wasn't originally conceived by Tom King, it's actually a much older concept from the comics that has been brought back into the spotlight. Superman Volume 1, issue number 330, published in December 1978, is perhaps the only time the writer seriously attempted to explain how Clark Kent's glasses actually fooled everyone. According to the story, the glasses were made from pieces of the plexiglass window from the Kryptonian rocket that brought baby Kal-El to Earth. Not only were they indestructible, able to withstand even his heat vision, but also projected the look of Clark Kent for others. Superman's political intervention stopping Boravia from invading the neighboring nation of Jarhanpur draws striking parallels to the ongoing Israeli-Palestinian conflict. However, it is important to clarify that Boravia was not invented for the film as a fictional Israel. Boravia has roots in the comics and appeared long before Israel existed. It was first introduced in Superman Volume 1, issue number 2, published in September 1939. Just like Superman, Boravia was also created by Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster, both Jewish. However, I must admit that James Gunn made a clever choice in using these fictional nations to comment on a globally urgent issue, allowing the Justice Gang to step in and defend what they believe is truly worth protecting. The second half of the broadcasted Kryptonian message in Superman takes a dark turn, revealing that Superman's parents intended for him to conquer Earth and take multiple wives to rebuild the Kryptonian race. This concept echoes a similar theme from Grant Morrison's All-Star Superman, where Kryptonian astronauts arrive on Earth and express disappointment that the planet has not been transformed into a new Krypton under Superman's watch. Another All-Star Superman similarity is the group of Superman robots in the Fortress of Solitude. In Superman, there is a moment of dark humor when Superman shares a heartfelt conversation with Lois in her apartment, and the Justice Gang is locked in battle with a rampaging monster. The scene immediately brought to mind the iconic fight by the JL guys against Starro the Conqueror from The Brave and the Bold, issue number 28, published in March 1960. That issue marked the official debut of the Justice League of America and featured one of the greatest superhero lineups ever assembled. The interview between Lois and Superman was thoughtful for several reasons. First, it highlights the emotional complexity Lois faces in trying to understand the alien she loves, who presents himself to the world as Clark Kent. Despite their romantic bond, the conversation becomes tense as the interview challenges Superman's priorities and purpose on Earth. The second point was an interesting political mess they discussed that escalated Superman's reason for siding and opposing the divisions. As mentioned earlier, the conflict between Boravia and Jahanpur strongly echoes the ongoing Israeli-Palestinian conflict. It seems that Warner Brothers and James Gunn were convinced to sell this narrative, because this has shocked the audience for both positive and negative reasons. But still, it is a heavy surprise that the assumed Israel is antagonized in the American entertainment industry. In any case, we witnessed a political conflict resolved by superheroes, a kind of dream scenario we can only wish for in the real world. I want to address the weight of cruelty that Lex Luthor unleashes in the film. In Superman, we learn that Lex sold arms to the Boravian military worth billions of dollars. Those weapons were bought to invade Jahanpur, which Superman eventually stopped. But here is the twist. Lex admitted that he created the Boravian military conflict so that he would have a legitimate excuse to kill Superman. Damnation. Think about that. This is not just villainy, it is calculated evil. Raising a conflict, triggering a war, spending billions, and causing the deaths of thousands just to settle a personal vendetta. That is not just a comic book scheme. It mirrors something painfully real. What hits harder is how closely this reflects the real world. The film may use fiction, but the parallels are loud. What I am deeply observing here is a bigger and deeply frustrating real picture, which is how the world is controlled by superpowers. Lex Luthor may be fiction, but his evil plan is not far from the kind of ruthless decisions made in the real corridors of global power. The bigger writers, the big daddies who orchestrate the global politics, the one who sells arms worth billions of dollars. I'm talking about the bigger council, whose heads decides the fates of other communities, nations, and countries. And practically, this is evident that superpowers have caused destruction, and even spent billions and trillions of dollars just to catch one man. The Superman scene that tore me with deep thoughts was of a young Jahanpurian child raising the symbol of hope as the Boravian military marched in to invade. While the people of Jahanpur fled in fear and desperation, trying to escape their harsh and broken reality, this one child stood still. The child, with eyes closed, repeatedly called out to Superman, pleading for rescue as the soldiers drew nearer. For anyone who sympathizes with the Palestinian struggle, they can understand where this kid is coming from. The cruelty and injustice at a larger volume, day and night. This is a tiny portion of their deadly fate that hopes for a messiah like Superman to show up and protect them from all evils. One of the strongest criticisms I have about Superman is its overstuffed narrative, which ultimately weakens the very concept of Superman's solo heroism. For a film that is meant to focus on the Man of Steel, his presence feels surprisingly diluted. The film features 3 members of the Justice Gang, and Metamorpho also joins them later. The problem here is that Superman's gallantry, which should have been the heart of the film, is frequently sidelined. He often needs assistance, which undermines his status as the most powerful being on the planet. Metamorpho has to create an artificial sun to restore his strength when he is imprisoned and helpless. When Ultraman defeats Superman, it is Krypto the dog that carries him to the super robots to fix him. During the battle in Metropolis, it is the Justice Gang that helps him overcome the monster. These moments suggest that Superman cannot stand on his own in his solo film, which is deeply disappointing. Being overstuffed also means that there are plenty of characters in the film, and most of them were not even half-baked. Superman's Kryptonian and Earthly parents, entire Daily Planet staff, jail heroes, all of them had underdeveloped characters. As the first live-action film of the new DC universe, the filmmakers had a responsibility to ease the audience into this new world with clear, cohesive storytelling. Instead, the first 12 minutes feel more like the continuation of an existing saga, as if this were a sequel or even the third or fourth film in a larger franchise. It creates the sense that we have missed something important. To be clear, I'm not asking for another retelling of Superman's origin, but the screenplay leaves far too many unanswered questions. How did Superman and Lex Luthor become enemies? How did Superman and the Justice League meet? Why is Max Lord sponsoring the Justice Gang? How and why was Metamorpho imprisoned by Lex Luthor? What event led Superman to build an army of robots in the Fortress of Solitude? The first live-action film of this DC universe struggles to stand on its own and misses the opportunity to properly introduce the world it is supposed to know. watch. My favorite character in Superman was Nicholas Holt's Lex Luthor. His presence brings the film the exact kind of antagonism it needs. A deep personal feud that fuels his obsession with destroying Superman. This version of Lex Luthor is driven by an intense mix of hatred and jealousy, all sharpened by his genius-level intellect. His pride blinds him, but it also drives him to challenge Superman's very existence. Just listen to him when the Fortress of Solitude is compromised. I can't stand metahumans, but he's so much worse. Superman. He's not a man, he's an it. A thing with a cocky grin and a stupid outfit that somehow becomes the focal point of the entire world's conversation. Nothing's felt right since he showed up. That is exactly what makes him a compelling archenemy. A man whose deepest desire is not just to defeat Superman, but to exterminate his existence. Nicholas Hoult captures this madness and arrogance with striking precision. His Luthor is sharp, twisted, and entirely believable, an ideal counter to everything Superman stands for. Nathan Fillion's take on Guy Gardner, the Green Lantern, is a fun and energetic addition to the film. His cocky attitude adds a welcome layer of humor and tension. Isabella Merced, on the other hand, didn't get enough screen time to fully explore her version of Hawkgirl. I'm satisfied to see both Anthony Carrigan and his character Metamorpho given a meaningful place within the larger narrative. Eddie Gaddagi's Mr. Terrific is a surprise package for me. This superhero was much better utilized than expected. We get a whole massive upgrade in his heroism on a larger scale. The value of such an underrated comic book superhero is raised, and now we can identify what he means to the Justice League. David Corenswet as the new Superman is a strong and impressive choice. He fits well into this lighter version of the character, one who knows his purpose and serves the people. James Gunn shapes and guides David into becoming the kind of Superman who reflects hope, kindness, and responsibility. One of Superman's greatest qualities has always been his compassion. The film gives us glimpses of that, like saving a squirrel, checking in on office staff, caring for children, and even holding a baby for Metamorpho so he can fight. He causes no destruction and remains calm, grounded, and deeply human. Should I compare David Corenswet's Superman with Henry Cavill's? No. Both played their versions differently. Cavill is still my favorite, but Corenswet deserves credit. He brings a fresh energy to a younger Superman, more caring, more approachable. James Gunn set out to start fresh, so he built a new universe. And in Corenswet, he found someone who looks like Henry and honors the legacy. Now that Henry Cavill's Superman is mentioned, the comparison is inevitable. Zack Snyder's Man of Steel or James Gunn's Superman. Let me be very clear. I'm a big Zack Snyder fan, and Cavill's Superman is still my favorite. I enjoy dark, gritty tones, so Man of Steel worked for me, and I've rewatched it multiple times. That said, as a comic book reader, I also believe that Superman is meant to be in a light tone. Gunn's Superman captures that classic essence, more in line with the Golden and Silver Age comics. While it was disappointing to see Warner Brothers move on from Snyder's vision, I respect creative shifts. James Gunn, being a comic book fan himself, delivered something true to Superman's roots. Many still hope for a restored Snyderverse, and I once did too. But realistically, reviving it would have cost hundreds of millions and posed major risks. It is time to accept that it is not happening. After watching Superman, the idea of Corenswet's Superman and Robert Pattinson's Batman existing in the same universe does not feel right. The biggest problem is tone. James Gunn's Metropolis and Matt Reeves' Gotham belong to completely different worlds, visually and thematically. Forcing them together would mean one of the stories loses its identity. In the Snyderverse, Batman and Superman clashed because Superman was presented with a darker tone, which matched Batman's world. That's not the case here. If I were in Gunn's position, I would keep Matt Reeves' Batverse in a separate multiverse. For this new DC universe, I would introduce a different Batman, one whose tone fits the world Corenswet's Superman lives in. The ending of Superman hints at a few clear continuities. Lex Luthor is sent to Bellerive, the meta-human prison run by Amanda Waller. With Amanda Waller TV series on the way, we likely see more of Lex there. Rick Flag Sr., introduced in Creature Commandos, voices concern about metahumans rising. Since he's also in Peacemaker Season 2, expect more crossover from Superman. Supergirl appears briefly near the end, and she's the one who owns Krypto, yet seems unaware that Krypto was kidnapped and returns home drunk. With her solo film coming, this version of Kara might lean more toward a reckless, possibly comedic take. Maybe chick flick way more than expectations. Superman is a refreshing and entertaining start for a younger and more hopeful Man of Steel. James Gunn clears the first hurdle with confidence, but the real challenge lies ahead, which is building a cohesive and compelling DC universe. Success will depend not just on this strong opener, but on how well the next chapters hold up. For all you Superman fans who are divided over which Superman film to prefer, if you want a darker Superman, watch Man of Steel. If you want a lighter tone, watch Superman. I'm Knaik.